Good morning, everyone. Oh my gosh, so many people already in the chat. Wow, Keto Coffee Cheers. Day one of the New Year Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. Oh my, I just can't even believe it's spring. It's nuts. Well, anyway, guys, today we're going to be going over the 5 intermittent fasting schedule mistakes because from the last time we talked on live stream, that was something really big that I saw a lot of questions and confusions on just schedules in general, like how frequently you need to be eating throughout your window or how you can actually plan your window. So that's obviously, especially for day one of the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge, probably the most important place to start so that we can make sure to set you guys off on the right foot. I'm not sure if you guys can see, we have Sophie here. She somehow configured herself underneath the rug. She's also clearly very excited, sleeping throughout this whole thing. Anyway, all right, so if you guys are new here and you don't know about the Spring Challenge, it's a Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. So it starts today, but you can still join in if you haven't already gotten started. The details for the challenge are linked in the description below. It's 4 weeks long, meal by meal planning, but also the AEN nutrient timing, so you can make your own meals and restaurant guidelines if you want to go that route as well, which I totally understand too. I obviously like to cook, and I know a lot of other people like to cook and have that flexibility. So that's what that AEN nutrient timing is exactly there for. So I talked about this a bit during the last live stream for the announcement on the various grand prizes too, but I just wanted to reiterate this because we have a lot of really awesome grand prizes for one randomly selected prize winner at the end of the 4 weeks. So we have, of course, Purity Coffee, duh, because gotta have all the coffee for the Keto Coffee Cheers. Also have to make sure I'm not gonna spill my coffee. So we have, I think it's like, I have a picture of it on the grand prize announcement. It's like a whole bundle of different Purity products. So really amazing. I think even the Pocket Purity is in there, which is one of my favorites because it's like a little tea bag that you can just bring with you on the go if you're traveling. So it's amazing. We also have Ancient Nutrition, where they're going to be donating one of their new collagens, where it's actually been clinically studied. I believe it's the first collagen supplement that's been clinically studied to show improvements in joint health. I know for sure that was one of the improvements, major improvements that they saw. So really excited about that one. They also have their CBD or their hemp oil that they're donating as well. And then we have, Kettle and Fire. So Kettle and Fire, the bone broth company, that is just amazing if you don't want to have to make bone broth. It's such an easy, convenient option. So they are going to be donating 6 containers of their bone broth, which is amazing. And then we have the reserves. So for all my matcha lovers, we have ceremonial grade matcha. We even have spirulina and maca. So a bunch of stuff for the grand prize. So I'm really, really excited about that. We have a lot of people in the chat. I want to make sure I say hi to some people as well. Hi, Erica, Cincinnati. Good morning. Good morning, Becca. Do you get cortisol spikes when you're excited too? I'm pretty sure I do. Good morning, Camille. Keto Coffee Cheers, Autumn and Sophie. Sophie needs some coffee. Good morning, Gigi. Good morning, everyone on here. Kitty, good morning. John, Kimberly, April, Lisa, Jennifer, good morning. Iowa, Switzerland, Texas, oh my gosh. Indianapolis, Trinidad, lots of places. Awesome. All right, great. Okay, so like I mentioned, if you are just joining in, this is the first live stream of the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. So I will be having one each week, and you can just, if you want, comment down below after this on what you possibly want to see next week, and that'd be great. But today we're talking about intermittent fasting schedule mistakes because that's really the most important place to start. So we make sure you guys are being set off on the right foot. If you still want to join in on the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge, details down in the description below. Obviously, we have an amazing, very supportive community. As you guys can see, so many people in the chat. So it's a really great time to be participating. I'm just going to lower that a little bit. I can still see Sophie. Okay, so let's jump straight into the details. The very first one, and if you guys are not new here, this shouldn't come as a surprise, but the very first mistake that I see all the time with the intermittent fasting schedules is that the eating window is too short. So if you guys joined in for, I think it was not this last live stream, but the previous one before that, we talked a lot about how to calculate your protein needs and how important that is for body recomposition goals, for creating hormones, for creating skin cells. In fact, I just had a client who noticed such a just improvement in her skin and in the reduction in breakouts from increasing her protein intake. So getting enough protein in during your eating window with intermittent fasting is so crucial. That's why with the A and nutrient timing, with the meal plans in the complete intermittent fasting bundle, emphasize the protein intake in there. And if your eating window is too short, like let's say if you choose a 20-hour fasting window, and so your eating window is only 4 hours, for a lot of people, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get enough protein in, especially if you have inherently higher protein needs, which if you are curious on how you can calculate that, it's in the bundle, but you can also go back to that live stream. I'll make a note to make sure I link that down below as well. But you can actually calculate your protein needs there and determine how much protein is that you need. And if you are someone who needs a lot more protein, then you're going to be needing a slightly just wider eating window. So not the fasting window. So you actually want a slightly shorter fasting period so you can allow for enough time to get in the protein. Because protein is so highly satiating. They've actually done overfeeding studies where they try and get people to overeat protein in its sole state. And it's nearly impossible to do that because it is so satiating, which is great. That's one of the reasons why it's such a great tool for, especially if you have a weight loss goal in mind. But it's crucial to be getting enough protein. And if you are having that smaller window, then it's very possible that you aren't going to be getting enough protein in because it is so satiating during such a small amount of time. So with this in mind, it's not that you can't have a 20-hour fast, but if you are someone who has higher protein needs, like let's say if you are an athlete, for example, which again, go back to that protein live stream after this, make sure you check out a lot of details on how you can actually calculate your protein needs. But if you are someone who needs more protein, you might want to start off with more of a 16-hour fast to allow for more 8-hour eating window, or even a little shorter. You can always start off with 14-hour. That's still you're still getting a good amount of fasting period. You're still getting the migrating motor complex stimulated during that time. You're still getting the reduced insulin response from that fasting period. So you're still getting great benefits, but you need to make sure that you're still getting enough time for that eating window to allow for the protein. Most of the time I see people just get really excited about intermittent fasting and want to go for like one meal a day or that 20-hour fast because it's a really cool strategy to hear about all the benefits. So you want to maximize those benefits, but you can't really maximize those benefits if you're also not getting enough for your needs within that eating window. So that's the biggest first mistake. Eating window is too short / fasting period is too long. So make sure you're watching out for that. And to just pair this information, go back to that protein live stream and make sure you check out your protein needs. I see already a lot of questions in here, which by the way, guys, I will be answering questions throughout this. I'll also be answering questions at the end. So let me see. There's some other, I saw someone ask something about eggs. Okay, Dina is asking, is it safe to eat 2 eggs per day? Absolutely. So unless you're allergic, of course, then any eggs shouldn't be eaten. But the main reason why people think eggs are bad is the cholesterol concern, because eggs are fairly high in cholesterol. It was actually back in 2015 that the USDA guidelines, where they set out the recommendations every year for the different nutrient intakes and the recommendations, they actually took away the cholesterol limit, the dietary cholesterol limit, because they found that there's no research to really back up the fact that dietary cholesterol, meaning the cholesterol in your food, will have any impact on your blood cholesterol. So that's one of the main reasons why people have a little bit of hesitations when it comes to eggs. But even the USDA guidelines have retracted that, and they're usually the last to make any decision. So that's just really, eggs are actually essentially a superfood. They have a lot of additional nutrients that you can't get from other foods. So by all means, 2 eggs are great. I actually have a video coming out soon though on how you can bump up the protein for eggs, because they are a little bit lower in protein compared to other, at least animal-based proteins. Each egg only has about 6 grams of protein. So I do have a video coming out on that soon. Okay, let me see. Hi, Andrea. Christy, new sub, no idea what's going on, but listening with enthusiasm. Well, if you guys are just joining in right now, this is the first live stream for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. So each week I'm going live for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. If you want to join in with all the other AENpeeps, I do have the details for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge down the description below. There's meal plans, recipes, exercises as well. So a lot of really great information, take you step by step throughout the process. Okay, so the second biggest intermittent fasting schedule mistake, which is today's topic, you're breaking your fast too late. So this almost goes hand in hand with that fasting window being too long, except that there's an extra layer to this one where, like let's say I had a client actually where she broke her fast around 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. So she was eating all of her meals from like 8 p.m. to midnight. And although that technically fits the intermittent fasting schedule, if you can, try and break your fast a little bit earlier in the day, because what happens is our body tends to be a little bit more insulin resistant the later in the day we get. So especially if weight loss is your goal, it's harder to achieve that goal if you're eating later in the day. Because what happens with insulin resistance, the body actually needs to pump out more insulin in response to the same amount of food. And so if you are getting more insulin resistant later in the day, then you want to not secrete as much insulin if weight loss is a goal with insulin being that storing hormone. So looking back at this, I always recommend at the very least trying to get about 2 hours before your bedtime when you're going to be breaking your ending your eating window. So like, let's say you go to bed at 10. So at the very latest, trying to get around 8 o'clock that you're going to be ending your eating window and starting your fast again, which means that breaking your fast might need to go a little bit earlier than maybe that's like that 6 p.m. example, because you won't be able to fit all your needs in if you break your fast too late either. So it's really a balancing act here. You want to make sure that you are getting enough time for that protein and the additional nutrients that your body needs during your eating window. But you also want to make sure that you're not eating too late in the evening, just because the body tends to be a little more insulin resistant. Of course, you have to work with your schedule as much as you can. So if you can just even get your fast starting again an hour earlier than you had previously, great. But as long as you're getting some type of buffer with the evening time, that way you're just not having all your meals during the time when your body's the most insulin resistant. I just saw Sarah said, is it bad to have 2 to 4 eggs a day? No, just rewind about 3 minutes from now. I just went over that. Oh, Claudine. Hi, Autumn. You're amazing. Thank you. I'm doing a 36-hour fasting, so 36 hours per week. Is it dangerous, or will I get results faster? So this goes back to the idea that if you're just fasting longer, that you're going to be losing more weight because you don't have as much time to be eating, which I'm not a big fan of. Theoretically, there are therapeutic benefits with longer fasts, which certainly have their place, especially if you are way more insulin resistant and you really need to be getting insulin levels a lot lower. But for most people, I recommend sticking to more of a daily type of sustainable fast rather than trying to go through these longer fasts each week to essentially balance out the week. It just can make it so that you don't have as great of a way that you're using the fasting. It can be used more as a as a way to balance out maybe bad habits earlier in the week, which of course is not sustainable. Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce a lot of names. I'm not great at names. Shakiris is asking, how about almond milk creamer? Does it break a fast? It depends on the type and the amount that you're using. So just straight up unsweetened almond milk, usually around a 1/4 cup, you're fine. We always go back to that 1 gram of protein and 1 gram of carbohydrates to try and stay under within your fasting period so that you're not going to break your fast and cause an insulin response. But I would check to see if your almond milk has any type of sweetener in it, because often they do. And even if it has something like stevia or monk fruit, I'm always hesitant on recommending those during a fasting period, because for some people, it does have an insulin response, even though it doesn't have any quote calories. So I would just double check that and see what's in your actual almond milk creamer that you're using. Okay, so let's go on to the third intermittent fasting schedule mistake. The third intermittent fasting schedule mistake. Sometimes I talk too fast even for myself. The third mistake, you're too strict, which I know can seem counterproductive as some type of mistake. But essentially, the reason why this can be a mistake is because you're not allowing for your life to happen. So, like for example, our schedule during the week when we're working for most people is a lot different than the weekend. You might be going to bed a lot earlier during the week, and so therefore your window is going to be a lot earlier. Maybe on the weekend you have people over for dinner or whatever you're doing. You might be up a little bit later, and so you might be eating a little bit later as well. Maybe you're sleeping in a little bit more, and so you actually have maybe only an hour between when you wake up and your eating window would normally start. This can make it so that it's not going to be very sustainable if you always stick with that same window. What I like to do and what I always suggest to the AENpeeps is that you allow for some type of window shifting, especially when you know that you have some type of dinner or some type of event or whatever it might be that's going to make you start to eat a little bit later. So the way that this could work in practice, and the reason why this is so important is because you don't want to feel that you can't participate in other activities that are important to life. So like I mentioned, the dinner party, celebrations, birthdays, whatever it might be, you want to still be able to participate, have dinner with your loved ones. And for that, having that window shifting is a really great tool. And if you're just too strict, then you might be the only one at that dinner party or when you have friends over, whatever it might be, who's not eating. And that's not fun. It just makes you feel like you're separate and not involved with your community. So what I like to do is allow for some type of window shifting, where during the week I go to bed really early. Usually we're done eating around 6:30. So we're going to be starting our meals around 10:30. But then on the weekend, we like to sleep in a little bit. And for us, it's really not that much of a sleep in. It's like 7:30 instead of 6. But because of that extra hour and a half, we tend to not be as hungry. Myself and my fiance tend not to be as hungry as early because we have that sleep in time that pushed our day to a little bit later. So what we will do is push our day by about an hour and a half, where our normal eating window would have been like 10:30. We might start eating at around 12. And then that allows for a little buffer to have a little bit of a later dinner for those few times per week, if you are having some type of celebration or whatever it may be. So not that, again, that big mistake is not allowing for some type of window flexibility and being too strict with your schedule. Really remember, this is about making sure that this is a lifelong process where you're able to continue to use something that's going to work for you. And if you're too strict with yourself, then you're just not going to be able to maintain it. I hope that made sense. I do have some other videos on that concept as well. Okay, so let me see some questions on here. Yep, split arrow farm, window shifting is the best. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Timothy, my first 5 days of this challenge, I will be camping. Well, you're going to get a lot of negative ions then. Lots of decreased cortisol. Okay, that's a great question. Someone asked, should I break my fast on time even if I'm not hungry yet? I usually recommend, it's still important to make sure that you're getting enough nutrients in. So if you find that you're not hungry yet, then don't force yourself to eat. You don't necessarily have to eat until you start to feel a little bit hungry. But if you find that it starts to impede on your ability to get enough of the nutrients for your needs, then you might just want to try and stick to a little bit more of a schedule so that you're actually able to get those nutrients in and get the body recomposition goals that perhaps might be a goal, or just even all the important aspects of why protein is so useful, creating the new hormones, new skin cells, all of that. So it just depends on if you're able to get your nutrients in. If not, then try and stick to a little bit more of a schedule. But if you find that you are not hungry yet and your body is naturally telling you to fast a little bit longer and you're still able to get all those nutrients in later on, fine. That's absolutely fine. And a 2-meal structure can work for some people. Even a 1-meal structure can. It just depends on if you're able to get all those nutrients in those 2 meals or in that 1 meal. Just for example, if you were to calculate your protein needs, which going back to that protein live stream, you can go and use that too. I'll have, after this live, I'll make sure to link it down in the description below so you guys can find it. But some people might have upwards of 100 grams of protein, 120 grams of protein that they need per day. Sitting down to 120 grams of protein at 1 meal, I couldn't do it. I know that I would be excessively full and I would not be able to get to that. So again, just making sure to see how your body responds and what you're able to fit in during that window. So Lorena, I've heard other well-known YouTubers say that keto coffee hinders weight loss as it is still high in calorie. Any thoughts on that? Yes, depends on what you're eating along with the keto coffee. Keto coffee itself, which is going to have it's a pure fat source. It's not going to have an insulin response for the body. It's just going to increase satiety. But if you then go and break your fast with like a fruit smoothie where it's just fruit and it's super high in sugar, and then you're spiking the insulin, you're just going to be storing all of the fat that was within the keto coffee itself. It's not the fat in the keto coffee itself that's causing the problem. It's the increased insulin that's causing storage of that. So yeah, if you are pairing keto coffee with something that is going to really spike insulin, I wouldn't recommend. So that's I've also seen other like keto coffee recipes online where people will add in honey, and that is just the worst idea. You're pairing fat with a high sugar type of food that's really going to spike insulin and cause everything to be stored. So yeah, definitely wouldn't do that. Literally eating unnecessary carbohydrates while watching. Well, it's okay. You can have some keto coffee and then you don't need to. And you can still, so Timothy Paul, coffee black. Yeah, you can definitely still have that as well. So I like to have my keto coffee because it does, especially if you're a beginner, it does help to make it so that you get that satiety and that sensation of fullness where you're not going to be hungry during that fasting period. But if you are more focused on like the gut healing specific type of strategy where you really want to activate the migrating motor complex, something I talk a lot about in the complete intermittent fasting bundle, especially in the gut healing guru. Again, everything down the description below if you guys want to check that out. But having the keto coffee a little closer to the breaking of your fast or even during your eating window would be a better idea to more strongly activate the migrating motor complex. Okay. So let me go on to the next one. So the fourth intermittent fasting schedule mistake. You force a schedule that doesn't work. And this is something else I see happen so much. I believe in the 21-day intermittent fasting program, I talk a lot about this as well, where you can use something like an 8-hour eating window where a very typical type of eating window that a lot of people will default to is like 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., where they'll eat during that time from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. But that doesn't mean that you have to stick to that eating window. Again, for me, I usually am going to bed around like 8:30. So it doesn't make sense to be having my last meal around 8 p.m. So for me, my window starts a little bit earlier. So you just need to make sure that you find an intermittent fasting schedule that actually works for your schedule. Just because, for someone else, a 12-8 schedule works perfectly, it doesn't mean that you need to have that schedule. So finding the schedule that fits your life. I mean, there's even some people who have, like overnight shifts for work. Obviously, 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. wouldn't work for you because you're probably asleep during that time. So finding the schedule that actually fits your schedule and fits your life is really important, and not trying to mold your life into a schedule that might work for someone else. Camille, plus keto coffee is life. Agreed. Okay, so I see some more questions on here. Amy, and also cinnamon and vanilla in chia yogurt is great. Also agreed. Actually, I need some water, guys. Everyone have some water right now. Lisa, I tried Purity coffee this morning. It is absolutely the best coffee I've ever tasted. Agreed. Oh, thank you for the super chat. Jeff, is it safe to stay full keto, 20 grams net carbs a day for extended periods, like more than 90 days? Depends on how you do it. So I'm not full like ketogenic. There are some people where it does work really well for them, and it is for some people going to be necessary just because of the carbohydrate sensitivity level. So yeah, there's so many studies on people with extended amounts of time using the keto diet, and it's perfectly fine. It just depends on how you're actually using it and if you're getting the nutrients you need. So the one mistake that I can see happen is where a lot of people rely on these keto treats, which are just awful. I mean, if you see like the packaged goods where it's like keto cookie, it's not going to be good for you. Just look at the ingredients. It's a lot of erythritol, obviously a lot of like stevia, monk fruit, but definitely sugar, alcohols tends to be a big one, causes a lot of GI distress, and you're not going to be getting any of the actual nutrient value that your body needs. So it's the same thing as having, I mean, it's not going to have the insulin response likely as a regular cookie, but it's going to still have that junk food effect where you're not getting any nutrient value from it. You might get full, but then you don't get any of the nutrients you need. So you're essentially internally starving yourself. So again, it depends on how you do it. There's a lot of wrong ways to do something. There's a lot of right ways to do it. But there has been a lot of research on how people can definitely stay in ketosis for a long time. Okay. Oh, Becca says, Camille asked a great question about having 2 servings of protein powder per day. So I didn't see the question, but I'm assuming the question is, can you have 2 servings of protein powder per day? I usually recommend capping it at 1. The biggest reason why is because it's just, I mean, first of all, really check the type of protein powder you're having, because there's a lot of bad protein powders out there. There's especially a huge issue with heavy metals in protein powder. The Consumer Reports will break down all the different types of heavy metals and how much heavy metal is in each different protein powder. Unfortunately, just because the protein powder industry is so big and it's so easy to be making these, there's a lot of just junk protein powders out there, and it's so unregulated, and it has a lot of heavy metal exposure as a result. So if you are going to use protein powder, please just make sure that you're checking and that it is a high quality one. I have a blog post, maybe Becca, if you can link it down in the comments so people can check it out on the different types of protein powders that have actually been studied to at least be better protein powders, where they are free of or less containing, doesn't make sense, has less heavy metals. So you guys can check that one out, and maybe Becca can put it in there. Otherwise, I'll make sure to put it in the description below as well. But in terms of having 2 servings per day, if you're having a high quality one, then might not be a problem as long as you're using that high quality one and not double dosing on heavy metals. I usually try and recommend sticking to just one so that you get the variety of proteins, because it is still an isolated source of protein where, in nature, you're not going to find proteins that come just straight as protein. Like if you look at obviously plant-based proteins, most of them are going to contain a significant amount of starchy carbohydrates. But if you look at animal-based, it's going to come with quite a bit of fat naturally. Most proteins don't naturally come lean unless you're looking at like rabbits. Even chicken, if you actually eat it with the bone on, skin on, you're getting quite a bit of fat in there. And there's a reason why we have fat packaged with protein. Otherwise, it can lead to something called rabbit starvation. If you have too low of fat intake with protein and your protein is too lean, one common symptom of that is just a lot of diarrhea. So no one wants that. So going back to the idea of 2 servings of protein powder per day, I just don't recommend it, just because it's a good idea to make sure you're getting a variety of your protein sources and packaged in the original way they're supposed to. Doesn't mean you can't have 1 serving per day. Just make sure you're buffering that with more whole food sources of proteins as well, which I know Camille loves eggs, so that won't be a problem. Okay, I want to get to the 5th intermittent fasting schedule mistake. So this is a big one. You think you must be eating all the way until your fast begins. So this is something that's happened a lot, where people will be like, my fast is supposed to begin at 8, but I finished eating at 7:25 and I still have 35 minutes left. So I need to eat something. Otherwise, I'm not going to make it to the next day, or I just have to be eating all the way up until the eating window ends in order for it to work. First of all, if you feel that you are still hungry after your dinner where you need something, that's a big sign you missed out on either protein or fat. Go back, reassess the AEN nutrient timing, recalculate your protein needs. Just make sure that you're actually assessing your needs from that meal and that you're actually getting enough at that meal. Because if you're doing intermittent fasting and the nutrient timing right, you shouldn't feel hungry after dinner where you need to be having something after dinner. If you're in the beginning stages of breaking through some type of sweet tooth, it is normal to still feel like you need to have some type of sugar after dinner for at least the first 3, maybe 7 days. But if beyond that first 3 to 7 days, you're still feeling like you need something after that time, definitely a big sign that you didn't get enough of either protein or fat earlier with your meals. And the goal with intermittent fasting, remember, is not to eat less, it's to eat less often. And that's the same thing with the eating window too. You want to make sure you're sticking to true meals and not snacking. every time we eat, we're spiking the storing hormone insulin. And if you're able to limit that to meals, full satiating meals where you're getting all your nutrient needs from that, then you're going to have decreased numbers of time that you're also stimulating insulin. So if you feel that you need to have something eating all the way until that eating window ends and your fasting window begins and snack after dinner, big sign that you missed something earlier. Go back to the complete intermittent fasting bundle, see those satiety factors you can add in, and make sure that you're actually getting to that point where you are full and satiated. Need some coffee. Okay, so I see some other questions on here. Hala said, I'm 46. I see no results after 3 weeks of OMAD. I see that happen all the time too. Again, it's not addressing the eating window or not getting enough protein for your needs for those body recomposition goals. Definitely recommend check out the complete intermittent fasting bundle to actually see the types of meals to have during your eating window. And remember, longer fast isn't always better, especially when it comes to achieving a weight loss goal, especially because protein is such a big concern with getting you to that body recomposition goal. So Envy, does intermittent fasting help with muscle building instead of weight loss? Yeah, so what's really unique about intermittent fasting compared to just like straight up calorie restriction is that when you are in your fasted state, naturally the growth hormone is going to be a little bit higher. In fact, there's been studies showing, depending on how long you're fasting, it can increase quite a bit. I believe it's about 2,000% for a little bit longer fast. And growth hormone naturally protects the muscles and it spares the muscles so that you aren't going to be pulling the proteins from your muscles. And instead, with the insulin level lower, the body is naturally just going to be pulling from fat instead. So with that in mind, as you still need to be exercising, of course, you can't build muscle if you aren't exercising. It's just not going to happen. Muscle is super metabolically expensive. So the body's just not going to build muscle if you aren't actually putting a stressor on it and letting it know that it needs to be forming new muscle. You also, going back to the protein concept, you do need to be getting enough protein to actually recover from that exercise earlier. You need those amino acids to actually build muscle as well. But you can't just increase your protein intake and expect that to build muscle because, again, if you don't have a stimulus on your muscle, you're not going to be getting those the stimulus from your body to then package in and start making more muscle. So intermittent fasting does help to protect during that fasted state, which is great. In fact, the 2020 intermittent fasting review on weight loss that I mentioned quite a bit, that one actually found that intermittent fasting primarily utilizes fat as fuel. Which is great. We don't want to be pulling from muscle because that growth hormone is a little bit higher, but you do need to be making sure you're exercising and that you are getting enough protein to cover those exercise needs. I know this is going to be a question in here. So about if you can break your fast, like if you have to eat something right after you exercise in order to get those proteins for your body. Unless you're an elite athlete where you're doing like 2-a-days or 3-a-days and you need to be having that muscle recovery in between workouts, it's been found that as long as you're getting enough of the proteins for your body's needs during that 24 hours after your workout. So let's say if you work out at like 7 a.m., which I often do for my strength training, but you don't break your fast until 11 a.m. or noon, then as long as you're getting enough of those amino acids during that eating window, then you're going to still cover the amino acids needed to get that muscle recovery. So good question. Okay, so I actually do see this question a lot. So Marie is asking, how do you feel about powder green or power beets and smoothies? So like green powder, you can definitely add that in if you like. Just check to make sure it doesn't have any added sugar because most of those powdered greens are going to be like some dehydrated form of like, wheatgrass juice or whatever it might be. And that can usually taste pretty bad. I'm not sure if you guys ever did this back in the day. I remember like going to Jamba Juice when I was younger and doing the wheatgrass shots, and it was awful. Like you'd get such a bad stomach ache from that. And so it doesn't taste good. So a lot of these companies will add in sugar to make it taste better. So just check to make sure it is a pure brand where if you are going to use those green powders, that you can get the benefits without the negative effects. And if anybody, I know we have quite a bit of people who've been coming in and out. So if anybody is new here, this is the first live stream for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. It starts today. So we'll be doing a weekly live stream each week that you guys always decide the topic. Literally, I just ask you and then we talk about it. So if you do want to join the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge, we have 4 weeks of meal by meal planning, restaurant guidelines, workouts, all of that. You can check out the details in the description below for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. Okay, so I think I saw someone ask about branched chain amino acids breaking a fast because someone else answered it. Thank you, Jason. Yes, branched chain amino acids do break a fast. So amino acids can cause an insulin response. And remember, the insulin response is what we're trying to keep lower during the fasting period. Otherwise, you're going to be breaking that benefit of that fast. So if you are taking branched chain amino acids, it could still cause an insulin response and therefore could break the fast. Oh, so gosh, I'm really bad at names. I'm sorry. Thienga Nielsen. Hello, Autumn. My husband and I have just joined you this week. We're so happy we found you. Been enjoying your smoothies. Yes. Looking forward to a healthier future. Thank you for all you do. Thank you. Okay, so someone else is asking, does Manuka honey break a fast? Yes, it is a sugar. So it is going to break a fast, cause an insulin response. So I actually have, I don't know if you guys have been on my blog before, I have a whole section on does it break a fast? So I'm actually going to writing that down to make sure I put it in the description after this, but I have a lot, I think like 60 different blog posts going into detail on a lot of these common type of food sources like collagen, like coffee, like honey. Does it break a fast? So I always am creating content on that, and I have a whole section within there, so you can check that out. It's on my blog, autumnlnutrition.com. And if you want more details on a lot of these items on does it break a fast, you can find a lot of that information on there. So guys, if you're joining the challenge and you're excited, put a thumbs up for this video. Keto coffee cheers. I need another sip. Okay. So some more questions on here, which by the way, that was so anticlimactic. Those are the 5 intermittent fasting schedule mistakes. I'm going to go through and answer some more questions because there are a lot of questions coming on here right now. But so just to recap, the 5 intermittent fasting schedule mistakes: eating windows too short because you're not allowing for enough time to have the protein or other nutrient needs. You're breaking your fast too late because of that issue with insulin resistance. You're too strict and not allowing for that window flexibility. You force a schedule, it doesn't work because you're trying to fit what you hear works for someone else, but you're not allowing for your actual schedule. And then you think you must be eating all the way until the fast begins. So those are the main ones. And if you want to just a recap on how these actually work and the details on them, you can just rewind. But I'm going to go through and answer some more questions. Okay, so someone else is saying we don't get purity coffee here in Mexico. I know. I'm really excited for them to eventually start expanding out to different countries. Any other brand you can suggest? The next level is going to probably be the bulletproof beans. I believe they deliver to most countries. My one hesitation with them, I do love that they at least claim to be mold toxin free. That's one thing to look out for, guys, because a lot of coffees will say they're mold free, but not mold toxin free. Technically, almost all coffees are mold free because they are going to roast off a lot of the mold in the roasting process. But not a lot can claim to be mold toxin free. They actually have to go to a lab and test the coffee beans to make sure that they are free of mold toxins. The mold toxins are what the mold actually produces, and it can't be killed off by the roasting process the way that mold can. And the mold toxins are what cause more of the issues. So you do want to look out for that. So if someone says they're mold free, ask them if they're mold toxin free. But with that regard, Bulletproof does claim to be mold toxin free, which is great. I believe they aren't organic. So that's my one issue with them. But if you can't get purity, then that's a next best option. So you can check that out. I will also be having, I think it's a 30% off discount code with purity. I'm going to post on my Instagram stories after this so you guys can check it out. It's 30% off plus free shipping for the next 2 days. So make sure to check out my Instagram stories after this for those details. If you don't follow me on Instagram, it's just at autumnl_nutrition. Oh gosh, keeps on jumping around. Okay, so Courtney, should I be concerned with when to work out, fasted or fed? Thanks. So this goes back to kind of what we were talking about with the growth hormone. Remember, growth hormone does protect the muscle. So if you are working out in a fasted state, you do get those benefits of the growth hormone protecting. It just depends on what your goal is and your aim is with exercise. If again, you're an athlete, and like let's say you're a sprint athlete, you're on track and you're doing all the sprinting, then you probably do want to be in a fed state just because you need to make sure that your glycogen stores are topped off a bit. But for most people, being in a fasted state is perfectly fine, and you're going to get those growth hormone perks of just protecting your muscles. But here's a really interesting question. So iWills says, do spicy foods affect your metabolism or insulin response or anything? So technically there are studies on spicy foods causing a little bit of a bump in our metabolism, like slightly increasing it. I think it's something like it can increase your metabolism by it's like 7 or 11%. But again, that doesn't really address the insulin impact. It's not going to make you more insulin sensitive or insulin resistant. It doesn't really have any impact on that. So even though it's great to add some spiciness to your foods, it's not necessarily going to have the biggest impact on weight loss goals. So yeah, go add plenty of chili peppers on there. I love spicy food too, but it's not necessarily like the thing that will help you achieve your weight loss goal. Okay, here's a great question. So Carolina asked, Autumn, I know you love organic and grass-fed. Do you know why grass-fed is better? Yes. So there's actually been some research on grass-fed versus grain-fed on the fatty acid distribution for the different types of proteins, beef. So with the grass-fed, you're going to have a more favorable omega-3 fatty acid profile, or at least that's what they're finding with the research. It's also just the way that they're actually supposed to be eating. They are supposed to be fermenting down the grass and supposed to be using that grass and then converting it within the body. And it does show that it helps with that omega-3 production, which that's something that a lot of people don't realize is that beef, and especially grass-fed beef, is a pretty good source of omega-3 anti-inflammatory fatty acids. So quality definitely matters there. But if you can't get that, at least I would recommend opting for organic. Ooh, Vicky said, my purity coffee literally just showed up. I love that. I actually did a study myself, like back in college. I tried to do research on if there's a different iron breakdown for grass-fed versus grain-fed beef. It was disgusting. I had to like put in my blender, my own personal blender, like beef, and then blend it up. And it was impossible to get out of my blender for a really long time after that. I wouldn't recommend it. But at least on the iron front, I didn't see a difference, but definitely the omega-3, so the fatty acid distribution, that's what can be the biggest difference with grass-fed. Okay, so someone said, please suggest a creamy keto tea recipe. I've got a lot. So obviously I have a keto matcha latte recipe, so made with matcha. And then I also have a keto chai tea latte recipe. I have a dirty chai tea recipe. What else do I have? I think those are the main ones. Those are on my blog as well. If you go to autumnmalnutrition.com and then you just go to healthy recipes, you can find those all there. So you can search like keto coffee or keto tea and it'll pop right up. But I have a lot of different recipes on there. All right. Will taking a magnesium, so Annalise, hi Autumn, will taking a magnesium and probiotic supplement 30 minutes before bed break a fast? As long as there's nothing additional in it. So with a magnesium supplement, I know that there's a bunch of different types. Like if you are getting the type that stirs into water, there might be some type of sweetener in there. So I would check that out. But if you're having like the capsule, obviously if you're having the gummies, there's definitely sugar in there and that will break your fast. But if you're just having the capsule, it shouldn't be a problem. And in fact, that's a great time to be having the magnesium supplement is about that 30 minutes or so before bed. So you can maximize the melatonin perks that magnesium has. And then I believe the other one, probiotic, same thing there. If you're having it in the capsule, shouldn't be a problem. But I know there are also like those like BioK. I don't know if you guys have seen that one before, where it's like a live type of probiotic that you drink. It tastes so good. But it will, because it is like milk that's within the base, or like soy milk for some versions for a plant-based option. Since it does have that in there, it will have some amount of carbohydrate that will break a fast as well. Just check which type you're using. If it's in the capsule, likely you're fine. If either are gummies, no. I wouldn't recommend using gummy supplements regardless. But yeah, so if it's in the capsule, you're fine. Okay, I want to flip around because I know I missed some questions earlier. Okay, so Mallory is asking, what is your favorite vanilla protein powder? I do have a blog post on this where you can check it out because remember, the heavy metal toxicities is something that you really have to watch out for when it comes to protein powders. But the two that I have seen that tend to be rated the best are Puori. I think that's how it's pronounced, like Puori. The one problem with that one is it doesn't come in a natural flavor. So if you want just a pure sugar-free option, they don't have that. And then Biochem. So Biochem has the Biochem Whey. They also have a natural or a stevia sweetener or all these different options. So both of those are typically rated some of the best in terms of heavy metal exposure, which really is the number one thing you should look out for so that you're not just downing heavy metal juices every day. But I do have, I will at the end of this link in the description below the protein powder blog post so you guys can check it out. Because you can find, it's really, really important to make sure that you are getting the heavy metals checked out for each of those. I know, KM, we don't get purity coffee in Botswana. Gosh, they got to start expanding. I'm going to tell them that. Okay, great question. So Anna, she said, this is Anna. I took an InBody test yesterday. When should I take the next one? So InBody, for those of you guys who don't know what that is, it's a type of body fat scanner where you can actually test your body fat as well as see your muscle mass changes. It's really cool. I really like this machine. Unfortunately, it's like a $6,000 machine that you have to go to like a gym or a doctor's office to get done. In fact, probably most doctor's offices don't even have it. It's usually going to be at gyms. But it does like a whole printout of how much muscle is in each part of your body. So especially for training, it's a great way to determine just changes you need to make. Like if you have way more muscle in your right arm versus your left arm, you know that you need to challenge your left arm a little bit more to even that out. But in terms of body fat percentages, it does the same thing. It tells you where your body fat is and how much body fat there is throughout your body. For those types, because to see changes in the muscle, and especially in the muscle, it takes quite a while. I would recommend actually doing that test no more than once every 2 weeks. That's a good way to actually see how things are progressing and see the changes as they're going. But if you guys can gain access to that, definitely the best way to keep track of progress and see how things are going, because you don't want muscle mass going down. Remember, that shows that you're not getting enough protein, you're not getting enough nutrients for your needs. You want you want muscle to either stay the same or be going up. Whereas with body fat, that's what we want to see coming down. So it's a really good machine to be using. If you don't have that or you don't have access to it, you can use like these at-home options. There's one called Arboleaf, another called Renfo. I'll also put a link for that. I have a blog post on those I'll put it on in the description below after this. But those are at-home options. They're like $29 that you can get on Amazon. So obviously one's like $6,000, one's like $29. One's going to be a lot better than the other when it comes to keeping track of your results and how accurate it is. But at least you can get an idea of how things are progressing. So if you wanted an at-home option, you could use either of those. Great questions. Okay, let's see. Oh, hi, Monica. So protein milk does break a fast. I don't know if that was a question, but yes, any type of protein will break a fast. So Stephanie said, hi, Autumn, can you recommend some good nutrition books? I'm studying nutrition. If you're studying nutrition, like in a university, best thing you can do, study anatomy, study physiology, study biochemistry, study OChem. No one likes it. No one wants to study those, but that's how you're actually going to succeed with understanding nutrition. Because that's what nutrition is. Nutrition is understanding each of those components. You don't want to be stuck with just having to stick with what other people said are guidelines. You want to be able to decipher studies and research on your own and see how it goes. So really, first things first, go and know the inside and out: anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, OChem. Okay, Rachel said, can you just intermittent fast Monday through Friday? Yeah, totally. So there's actually a study, that same one, I believe it was the same intermittent fasting weight loss review study where they reviewed all the various studies performed on intermittent fasting of clinical trials. It was just done in 2020. And they found that the more frequently you use intermittent fasting, obviously the better benefits you'll get, because you're allowing for more time or more increased number of times throughout the week that you're having the lowered insulin response. One thing I would highly recommend, though, is that on those days that you aren't using intermittent fasting, still sticking with some type of meal structure. So whether that be 2 meals, 3 meals, whatever it might be, still sticking with a meal structure and not having the snacking, because otherwise you're just getting a lot of that insulin spikes throughout the day from snacking. So that's obviously going to work against your goals in that sense. But also it just allows for the migrating motor complex, that gut cleaning process, to still get activated even on the days that you aren't using fasting. So yeah, you could absolutely do fasting Monday through Friday, but I would still recommend trying to stick to a meal structure even on non-fasting days. I think I also have a video going in much more detail on that coming up soon. Okay, so Jane said, hello from Turkey. Hi. Is plain popcorn okay? I'm assuming what you mean. I mean, it depends on what your goals are and how carbohydrate sensitive you are, but it is an extremely high starchy food with relatively very, very low protein, very, very low fat. So it's not going to have any type of those satiety hormone signaling. That's why, I mean, if you go to the movies, like, you can get a big thing of popcorn, or if you make yourself popcorn, I personally can eat like an extra large popcorn. I think anyone can do that. No one's going to eat like that small little popcorn and be like, oh, I'm full. There's just no satiety signal from that. So you're not going to feel full and satisfied. So in the sense of actually being satiated, popcorn doesn't work. In the sense of trying to keep insulin low, it's going to spike insulin. So, treating it like a treat, but it's not something, I see a lot of people actually having that like skinny pop that they have all throughout the day. It's very, very common with a lot of people to have these like skinny pop options, the brand skinny pop. But that is something, especially if you are already having difficulties losing weight, definitely wouldn't recommend, because it is going to keep the insulin high and keep satiety low. How to explain to my grandma that fat isn't bad for you. Send her my videos. Just send her a bunch and just keep sending them to her. Maybe she can keep up with how fast I talk. Any guidelines? So Vicky's asking, any guidelines for treat days? Yes. So I do have quite a bit of videos on this as well. So the biggest thing here is to make sure that you're not trying to decrease the amount of food you're eating on those treat days. So a big mistake I see is a lot of people will compensate or try and compensate for what they know they're going to have later in the day by eating less earlier. All that does is make you a lot more hungry come the treat. And then you're just going to eat and overindulge on something that's going to really spike insulin. Plus, a lot of the indulgences and treats are going to be extremely carbohydrate or sugar rich anyway. So you also get that issue where it's not going to keep you satiated. So instead of limiting yourself earlier in the day, have the types of meals that will keep you satisfied, the same meals that you'd normally have earlier in the day, and then incorporate that treat. That way you're not going into it really hungry and going to have a lot of this food that will not make you feel great and won't be supportive of your goals. Okay, I'm going to answer a few more questions here, but first, gotta have my keto coffee, which has gotten cold. Talking too much, not enough keto coffee. Which, again, if you guys are just tuning in, this is the first live stream for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. I'll be doing a weekly live stream throughout the challenge. And if you want to join in for the 4-week meal plan, join in with all the AENpeeps and the restaurant guidelines, the recipes, all of that, I do have the details for it in the description below, so you guys can check it out. Not too late to join in. Head on to that link. I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. Okay. Great question. Karen is asking, should we be taking apple cider vinegar before every meal? You can, but a lot of the actual study benefits are found just with that first meal. So a lot of the benefits, or a lot of the clinical trials done on apple cider vinegar tend to just be done on that first meal. Make sure it's diluted. Otherwise, that can cause a lot of GI distress. But yeah, you can just at least have it before that first meal, like with the ACV sipper, which if you guys are part of the challenge and you know that to post your fancy ACV sipper picture today, so you'll be seeing mine soon as well. But to make sure that you are diluting it, that you have it before that first meal, that's like the key most important factor, because it does help to ease the transition from a fasted to a fed state. You could use it before other meals as long as, again, it is diluted, but it's not as necessary. If you are more insulin resistant, it might be a good idea though. Okay, great question. So Colin is asking, can you comment on when/how much salt you should take before, during, and after a fast? I know you like Celtic sea salt. I do. So there's been studies that have found that anywhere between 2 to 5 grams of sodium is lost per day when you are fasting, but it tends to be in the earlier stages of when you first get used to intermittent fasting, and then the body starts to essentially not like peter off, but you get better at balancing those electrolyte levels yourself. I'm like drooling just from the keto coffee. So especially in the beginning phases, you want to make sure that you're really compensating for what is lost with the sea salt. And if you're experiencing where you constantly feel thirsty, even though you're drinking a lot of water, or if you are getting headaches or feeling lethargic, those are big signs that you're probably electrolyte imbalanced. So a good place to start, because each person, depending on how much salt you use on your food, each person, it'll vary on how much salt is needed. You can always start off with either an 1/8 or 1/4 teaspoon first thing in the morning. I like to start off first thing in the morning so you can get in that hydrated, balanced state. If you're exercising, and especially if you're sweating, or if you live in an area where you're sweating a lot, then you'll want to replace that even further, because even more sodium is lost through sweat. So having another 1/4 to an 1/8 of a teaspoon after your workout as well. And then for some people, again, depending on how much your body's going through that transition phase and how much electrolytes are lost, then you might even want to have it before bed as well. This is something that some of my clients will do that we've worked through, where if they're waking up in the middle of the night, even though they were doing all of the other strategies with balancing, making sure that they're keeping the melatonin going up naturally during that last hour or so before bed, not having tech before bed, even though they're doing that, they're still waking up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. Once we've actually addressed the electrolyte balance and even had a little bit of salt before bed, it can help to make it so you don't have to secrete more of the water, and it can help prevent waking up in the middle of the night for that reason. Because what you're doing, especially if you're drinking a lot of water and you're just peeing a lot of it out, your body is just trying to rebalance those electrolyte levels. So it's releasing a lot of water so that it can keep the electrolytes not as diluted. So if you're getting enough electrolytes that your body needs, then it won't necessarily cause as much of that having to wake up in the middle of the night as well. The whole history of salt is really interesting, and sodium, and how unfortunately got blamed for a lot of things that it didn't need to, and how important it really is. So it's definitely something I want to do a video on in the future in much more detail. But it is something that's really crucial to be having enough of so that you get that electrolyte balance, because sodium is the one that tends to be lost in greatest amounts. Okay. Yeah, you can add salt to your meals. Someone else is asking, instead of putting it in the ACV sipper. It's just, you need to be using quite a bit of salt. So unless you were having, and especially if you think about traditional break fast meals, like if you're having a smoothie, for example, or yogurt, most people don't want to add salt to that, especially in the amounts that you need. So that's where an electrolyte replacement might be necessary. Okay. A lot of questions about smoothies. So I do have a lot of smoothie recipes that you guys can check out, obviously on my YouTube channel, on my blog, as well as a ton in the Complete Intermittent Fasting Bundle. So definitely go there for that. Another person asking, Susan, does taking a collagen drink break a fast? Yes, it does, because some type of, any type of protein is going to cause an insulin response, and that's what can break a fast. So the two things that will cause an insulin response are going to be protein and carbohydrates. Obviously, most people probably know carbohydrates are an issue, but even protein can break a fast for that reason. So you won't be wanting collagen during your fasting period to really maximize that. There can be a time and a place for it for very specific types of therapeutic purposes, especially for very certain types of gut healing strategies. But for the vast majority of people, it's better off to have during your eating window. Someone's asking me to wave. Okay, great question. So Jason is asking, I hear different views on greens, cooked or raw. If you have any type of gut issues, so if you're following the Gut Healing Guru protocol in the Complete Intermittent Fasting Bundle, you will see this as one really big action step. having your veggies cooked is so important, because having them raw can be really hard on the GI tract to break down, especially if your GI tract is already inflamed, or just if the migrating motor complex isn't super stimulated yet. It can just slow down that process and cause a lot more fermentation, a lot more bloating, a lot more gas, and just be harder on your GI tract. So especially for those types of situations, if you are in more of if you are more focused on gut healing, then really making sure that you are getting those veggies cooked, maybe even at every meal that you are having veggies, is a really good idea. Otherwise, for most people, having raw is perfectly fine as well. Just make sure that it is paired with some type of fat, because you can't absorb those fat soluble vitamins from the veggies if you aren't pairing it with fat. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm not going to put any olive oil on my salad, because like trying to keep the olive oil or the oils low, that actually can make it so your body can't absorb the nutrients it needs, the fat soluble, because you need fat to actually carry that into your body. And obviously there's really limited fat that's going to be in like kale. Okay. So somewhat Karen is saying, I tried keto coffee for a month with intermittent fasting, but I noticed more acne on my face. What could have gone wrong? You might be very sensitive to lactose. I would check that out, because there is very, very, very minute amounts of lactose that's going to be in butter. So you might want to check that out. You might also want to check out the quality of the butter you're using. Again, remember that more favorable type of fatty acids that's going to be in grass-fed products versus grain-fed. So really make sure it's organic, grain-fed, and that it doesn't have any type of antibiotics or hormones added in. That can definitely cause issues with skin. Okay, I'm gonna have one more question on here. Someone's now just noticing Sophie in the back. She is no longer underneath the rug, but she's still sleeping. She's a little sleepy right now, which is odd. She's usually very energetic. AENpeeps community is amazeballs. Thank you, David. Okay, wow, lots of questions coming now. Let's see, what's a good last one? Okay, this won't be the last question, but just someone's asking, what if you've already purchased the complete intermittent fasting bundle? Does that automatically enter you into the challenge? Yeah, you can. If you have the bundle, you're all set. Just make sure that you check out the checklist for any additional things you might need. So you don't necessarily need to join the AEN Facebook group, but I would recommend it just because it's a really good community for support, accountability. But if you have the programs, just choose which route you want, the beginner or intermediate, and you're all set. Okay. So many good questions. I see some questions about ghee, but I'm not sure in what context. So let's go to black coffee versus green tea in the morning, which is better. Both have a lot of really great health benefits that are attributed to them. They both are really high in antioxidants. As long as you're just getting the one you like and you can stick to, both are great. You don't necessarily even have to be having tea or coffee during your fasting period. It's just a good option to help, reduce that hunger level that can happen when you're in those initial stages of using intermittent fasting. So if you want coffee, if you want tea, either are fine. Just make sure you're not adding in something that will cause that insulin response. I'm not as versed in tea, but I believe there are some issues as well with mold, but not as much as with coffee. So just at the very least, go for a higher quality option. Make sure that it is organic so you're not getting the added pesticides too. But I'm going to have to look more into the specific types of teas and the mold levels. Okay, one more question. Is it okay to add tofu in the meals that come with the bundle? That is technically an option, but if you are going to use soy, I typically recommend using tempeh over tofu, because at least tempeh is fermented, so it is going to decrease just the negative impact that soy can have. So it's not going to act as much as an anti-nutrient that can steal some of the nutrients from your body. if you are going to use tofu, at the very least as well, make sure that it is organic, because tofu is or soybeans are one of the most GMO'd food sources in America. So just make sure, if you can, choose tempeh over tofu. If not, then at least make sure your tofu is organic. But it can be used as a protein source. Just you need a little bit more than you probably think to hit the protein amounts. Again, check out that protein live stream, or check out the pages within the complete intermittent fasting bundle on how to calculate your protein needs, so you can see how much you'll need. Okay, so guys, for this next, because remember, we're doing each week of the intermittent fasting challenge, for the spring intermittent fasting challenge, we're doing a live stream each week. So I literally don't pick the topic until you guys tell me what topic you want. So make sure this is your opportunity to let me know what you actually want to learn about, hear about, and have us talk about next time. So if you can, just because it's hard to go through the live chat after, if you can comment after this video in the comments below, because I really, honestly, that is literally how I pick the topics for each live stream. So make sure you comment below, let me know what you want to hear about for the next live stream. And remember, if you haven't joined in yet already, you can still join in for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. All the details are down in the description below, so you guys can check that out. But otherwise, keto coffee cheers, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week.